Hey, Steve. It's been a long time.
God, it's been a while. Yeah, it's been a few days. Got stuff in the interim been going on, obviously.
You've aged well.
Well, I would say you've aged well too, but you would probably be sad to hear something along those lines that you aged at all.
I would. I'd probably commit myself to an entire box of those if that happened.
4 days back. Older.
Yeah, a whole 4 days. Welcome back, everyone. It's good to see you guys as well. Tonight we have we're going to have a little bit of a discussion on antitheism and religion. So nothing controversial, nothing contentious, just a really laid back, easygoing stream with no sort of disagreements. Right, guys?
Oh, absolutely. I'm known to be a very agreeable streamer.
Excellent. And we know, let me just make sure, Supreme Apologist, or Apologist Supreme, you're with us, right?
I am.
Cool. And we were just talking before we went live about your record. It's 422-0, right?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
My goodness, Vaush, you think you're up to the challenge?
Well, on my channel, I also have an uncontested debate record, so I feel like we've met the immovable object and the unstoppable force.
Uh-oh. This is going to be good.
This could be the deciding one. This could change everything.
Steve, you have nothing to announce, right?
I have nothing to announce. No, nothing to announce today. No announcements.
Okay. Tomorrow we're going to have a doubleheader. Fight the Flat Earth and Team Skeptic are taking over the channel for one of their science or satire shows. It's going to be really good. Make sure that you're here. That's going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern, and then at 9 p.m. will be the start of Now What, a weekly show that Shannon and I are doing where we will be taking your calls, and it focuses on the newly deconverted, the people who are just finding themselves out of religion and asking themselves, now what? So that will be at 9. So we have show at 7, show at 9. That's tomorrow. I'm getting some feedback.
Yeah, who's rearranging furniture? It sounds like they're moving, to another apartment or something. Okay,
cool.
No problem.
Just making sure. Okay, so let's dive into it. We're going to take a second and let each of you introduce yourselves to everybody. We'll start with you, Apologist Supreme.
Well, nice to meet you. You can find me, well, first of all, it's Apologist Supreme, correct? This time, thank you very much, Kyle. It's on Twitter. I'm on Twitter. I like to engage skeptics there. I'm also on Red Pill Religion, the website, redpillreligion.com, and the YouTube channel. We are the fastest growing Christian versus atheist debate channel around, in my opinion. I hope all of y'all go there and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Red Pill Religion.
Okay. And Vaush, how about you, sir?
Yeah. So my name is Vaush. I have a channel of the same name. I'm a far-left political streamer who focuses mostly on anarchic and anti-reactionary politics. And we have been in the past, I suppose, 3.5 months growing with extraordinary haste. So I am also fairly proud of my channel's growth. I'm happy to see that his and I's channels colliding at one another at high velocities. I'm delighted to see how this turns out.
Oh, that's right. You two have had some interactions on Twitter, or not you two, but the Red Pill Religion group. I saw that today.
Yes, I believe so. Very, very recently, in fact.
I'm sorry, I don't remember you.
What was it exactly, Vaush, that you were commenting about on Twitter?
Oh, I could be misremembering. I don't believe I am, but I believe Red Pill Religion recently uploaded a video, which was a highlights clip of a discussion between myself and the distributist, which I had 2 or 3 days ago. So I DMCA'd it.
Oh, well, lovely. This is gonna be great then. So let's start out with antitheism then. And like I said, before we went live, the only thing that I ask is that you don't talk over each other. Make sure that each of you get your thoughts out. I'll give you as much time as you need, and Steve and I will comment at the very end. We'll be here to sort of keep things on track and to make sure that the over talking is kept at a minimum. since we're going to be talking about antitheism, I guess we'll start with you, Vaush, and sort of lay out why you are an anti-theist, and then we'll let Apologist Supreme comment, and we can go from there. I think that'll be a good starting point.
Absolutely. So there are a lot of people who call themselves anti-theists. I hold no hatred in my heart for people who believe in religion or have superstitious beliefs. I feel that religion is something of a systemic poison, an institutional value which served once a purpose, but now does more harm than good. There have been I believe the term is called the New Atheist Movement. People like Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris, who on the outside purport to be anti-religious, but when you take a deeper look at their policies, they effectively replicate the exact same hierarchical structure demonstrated by institutional religion. I think that anti-theism, in its purest sense, is not hatred for religious people or religion, but rather a recognition that everything which religion has brought us can now be brought elsewhere, and every bit of harm religion has done for us can be mitigated.
Okay, and Apologist Supreme, what would you say back to that?
Well, lots of things. It is Christianity that brought in modern science to the world in the Enlightenment, and before then, it is Christianity that started the first universities at Bologna and Cambridge and Oxford and many others. If we're going to ask what is Christianity or why we should prefer theism or Christian theism as opposed to secularism or anti-theism, you have to look how theism or Christianity in particular accounts for a wide spectrum of the evidence. For example, the beginning of the universe, the fine-tuning and design of the universe, the question, why is there something rather than nothing? Gottfried Leibniz's question, why mathematics corresponds to reality. You know, I've been reading Kant, Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, and before we can know anything in the physical world, we need a conceptual framework and an intuition that allows us to sort out the data of raw experience into meaningful things we can interpret. So I think the Sensus Divinitatis by John Calvin, the moral argument, the argument from history, there's a whole plethora of reasons why a person should be a Christian rather than just a non-theist or anti-theist.
Okay. And Vaush, now you two can just sort of go back and forth since you both made it sort of a general statement. We'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, I think there are two general points there that I would like to respond to. The first is the suggestion that just because it was people of religious faith who established Oxford and the first universities, who kicked off the Enlightenment and brought us the values which we now champion in the name of anti-theism. I agree that religion has played an essential part in the development of humanity on a civilizational and scientific level. I mean, look at the golden age.
I hate to break in, but Josh, can you mute while he's speaking? That paper that you're doing is just driving people crazy.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that. It's just, the audio things, people. Audio. Okay, continue.
No, not at all. While these practices, these modes of thought were purported initially by religious people, these were, if we go back far enough, these are also all of the developments which we saw brought forth by people who, say, for example, believed that women and men were essentially different species, and that it was relegation between the two very disparate sexes that human civilization flourished. If we go back further, further into the future, we can see that people who purported, say, the validity of the scientific method and the motes of reason which we use still to this day also believed that the skull shape of Black people necessitated a lower IQ and lower creative output from people of those backgrounds. And what we see really is that throughout human history, people have had a mix of good and bad values, ones which have stood the test of time and ones which have not. And I do not believe history has shown us that it is the religious values with which these people held true to their heart that led them to those advances. Rather, the two are coincidental, correlation and causation and all that. The second point that I would like to address is my partner here's suggestion that we need an epistemological framework through which to interpret reality. And I agree with that. There is no way to be born and to have a perfectly rational empirical mind and to process the information in front of you in a way that makes sense on a logistic level. You need some base assumptions, like, for example, logical truisms: A equals B, B equals C, thus A equals C. And his truism, the logical sort of supposition he puts forth, the epistemological groundwork he lays, is the existence of God. The argument I would make here is that the epistemological framework upon which I rely is one which has served the empirical interests of humanity for millennia, the foundational principles of logic, whereas I can trace innumerable negative and debatably neutral sort of derivations of reason that have stemmed from a belief in God. I believe we can replace the epistemological framework we've relied upon for millennia with one which is more consistent, more reasonable, and produces much better outcomes.
Okay. Apologist Supreme?
Yeah. Okay. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Basically, I would say that it's Christianity that gave or that elevated the status of women in the early Roman Empire, the late Roman Empire, excuse me. Before then, women had no rights. Let me read to you something by Cal Neeson, the leading atheist philosopher. He says, "We have not been able to show that reason requires the moral point of view, or that all really rational persons, unhoodwinked by myth or ideology, need not be individual egoists or classical amoralists. Reason doesn't decide here. The picture I have painted for you is not a pleasant one. Reflecting on it depresses me. Pure practical reason, even with a good knowledge of the facts, will not take you to morality." And that's Cal Neeson, a professional atheistic philosopher. It's been Christianity that's elevated the status of women, that's stopped slavery twice, by the way, first in the medieval times and in America. You also mentioned epistemology. It was Thomas Reid that held to something called a broad foundationalism. That is, with trusting our cognitive abilities and perceptual abilities, we can come to an accurate realization of the external world. If you take God out of the picture, there is no guarantee for why our cognitive abilities should produce reliable results. Alvin Plantinga, a noted Christian philosopher, gives forth an evolutionary argument against or for naturalism, against our cognitive faculties arising by pure chance. It seems to me that you have to presuppose the existence of God to make sense of all these things. C.S. Lewis,
Josh, I'm gonna have to reel you in a little bit here because you're literally just galloping from one thing to another to another. Can you pick one of these focuses? What I don't think you really are. You're literally just quoting things and saying this person's saying this and this, but you're not discussing what that person is actually saying from your citation. Pick a citation that you wish by whoever we wish to talk about, Hume or Lewis, whatever. Talk specifically about that, because literally all you're doing is just going from one thing to another and another. I don't think.
All right.
How
about Thomas Reid?
Anybody
this is what he says.
Keep up with that, including Vaush.
What Thomas Reid says. He says, "We see then that Mr. Hume's philosophy is very much like a hobby horse, which a man, when he is ill, can keep at home with him and ride to his contentment. But just in case he should bring it to the marketplace, his friends would quickly impanel a jury and confiscate his estates and never have the solicitude to leave him alone again." It seems that Christianity provides a basis for practical common sense, for the elevation of women, for the development of science, for the first universities. So I think all I've been saying is a cohesive whole that shows Christian theism is far superior than anti-theism.
Okay, Vaush?
So there's a lot to unpack from that. First of all, I am utterly unconvinced by any suggestions that because people in the past who were religious did good things, that validates the existence of religion. If I were to discuss, for example, scientific achievements of the Chinese imperial dynasties, I would not attribute those scientific achievements to the fact that they are Chinese. This is a very hard correlation causation conflation here. People have developed, and as people have developed and civilizations rise, so too have we grown more progressive generally and more scientifically advanced. To suggest that these developments have occurred because of religion, when it was in fact religious authorities, the church and the Pope, especially in the West, who overwhelmingly opposed many of these modernizations, and the free thinkers of the Enlightenment tended to be very openly critical of pre-existing religious institutions, is the height of fallacy. And if we're to talk about the positives which have been done in the name of religion, I could bury you under the negatives. To suggest, by the way, that it was religious people who freed the slaves, I will tell you this, it's true, abolitionists did cite verses from the Bible, and so too did the slave masters. It seems to me that if we look back through history, religion is, as are all texts of interpretation, a way of morally justifying things people already believe. I subscribe to the Durkheimian view in this respect, a sociologist who I read about in school, because, that religion is itself a sociological phenomenon, a method of justification, and a means by which power is striated, not in and of itself an epistemological framework. If we look back throughout time, the scientific advances which occurred after and before the scientific revolutions followed the same basic principal lines of thought that were put forward by the Enlightenment thinkers. The idea of empirical reasoning to validate things which we can see with our own senses, that experiments must be repeatable, that we must not rely on metaphysical explanations for material phenomena. All advancements have been done fundamentally in either that system or through preeminent sort of primitive versions of that system, because that's what works. Every good thing religion has done throughout history, I can justify atheistically. But there are uncountable atrocities that have been committed which can only be justified through religion. The religious persecution that has taken place between Muslims, Hindu, and Shinto Buddhists across Southeast Asia for over a millennia, the wars in Europe, the persecution going on to this day in the Middle East, the way in which Christian evangelicals would travel to South America and to North America to convert or burn the natives that lived there. These are exclusively religious phenomena, and I believe that we can do better.
All right. Apologist Supreme, what would you say back to that?
In his 1925 lectures, Alfred White Northhead and Bertrand Russell were at a conference. And this really stunned Bertrand Russell, the anti-theist. This is what Alfred North Whitehead, not a Christian, said. I do not think, however, that I have ever yet brought out the greatest contribution of medievalism to the formation of the scientific movement. Was the inexplicable belief that there is a secret which can be unveiled. How has this conviction been so vividly implanted in the European mind? It has come from the medieval insistence on the rationality of God, conceived as with the personal energy of Jehovah and with the rationality of a Greek philosopher. Every detail was supervised and ordered. The search into nature could only result in the vindication of faith in rationality. The discovery of natural laws of the scientific method was by presuming a rational order of nature. This didn't happen in China. For example, I'm going to quote from the book.
Josh, let me ask you, do you have any original, like, if you notice, like, Vaush is speaking from his personal, like, views and experiences. It seems like you're just doing nothing but quoting author after author after author after author.
And historians think this is garbage.
But can't you, in your own words, tell us why, Steve, you're muted?
Hold on. Let me just read this. The Victory of Reason by Rodney Stark.
No, Josh, you're not going to do it. No, hang on, Josh, wait, please, Josh. This is where I come in. Kyle just literally asked you, matter of fact, if you have any original thoughts And what did you do? You went back to another quote. Vaush is not debating or discussing this with Hume or Lewis or anybody else of that nature. He's having a discussion with you. Do you have anything original like Vaush is doing? Because I think right now, honestly, Vaush is actually spot on in everything he said, and I don't hear any rebuttals from you on what he's actually arguing. And you're just saying, well, this philosopher says, this philosopher says. Okay, great. Can you make your own arguments and then substantiate them as needs be if it needs to be substantiated from some other philosopher? I'm all for citations, you know me, but you cannot have an argument, you cannot have a discussion primarily based on what other philosophers have argued. That is not how you have to do a discussion, Josh.
These things that Vaush is saying aren't taken seriously in the scholarly literature. For example, Ronald Numbers, you probably know, wrote about science and how Christianity is what shaped modern science during the Enlightenment. Also, Rodney Stark, you can look at him. Alvin Schmidt, how Christianity changed the world. There's all types of these books. And by the way, I provided a list. Josh,
I'm going to mute you if you don't. If you don't,
I got to mute myself
from
laughing. Sorry.
Yeah, just listen. All right, seriously though, look. Steve and I literally told you as clearly as we could that we want to hear your original thoughts, not what other people said throughout history. Like, what does Apologist Supreme think about anti-theism? And go.
I think anti-theist doesn't account for any of the broad range of experience from these arguments that I gave at the first, like the Kalam, the contingency argument, the fine-tuning argument, the argument from intentionality and mathematics, or the arguments from history or morality. I think that's at least 7 or 8 arguments that I gave. And then when we talk about history, it was Christianity that started this scientific enterprise. When you look at science, for example, at the Battle of Crécy, China was using fireworks. Their innovation was using gunpowder for fireworks. Guns were actually started being used in probably the year 1360 at the Battle of Crécy in the 100 Years' War. You have all these innovations down through a long list of history. But all these books that I'm mentioning, they talk about this in great detail. So what I've been trying to do is show that there's this myth that goes around from people that don't read, to be frank.
What is the myth?
I do contest that assertion.
Go ahead.
All right. The myth is that it wasn't Christianity that gave rise to modern science or to education and via our university system or our public health or a whole list of things.
Okay.
So I've read numerous books
right
on this and continue to read. And I just think your position, Vaush, is glib.
Hold right there. All right.
If I may, to suggest that it was religion which led to the formation of the Enlightenment is to suggest that it was the fashion trends of that time which brought about those modes of thought. If your argument is that Christians have done great things throughout history, I can't disagree with you. I mean, I'm not Christian myself, but I cannot deny that many of my cultural predilections were shaped by the culture in which I was born. American is undeniably, if not a Christian nation, then at the very least a Christian-inspired nation. But our argument here is not as to whether or not the Enlightenment and all the good that has been done throughout society is itself the product of people who were religious. The question is, was it the product of religion? I'm a Marxist in many respects, but in this one especially, because I believe in the historical dialectic. And I suppose there's a Hegelian trend here. I do believe that as time moves forward, ideas which were once rife with antagonism are worn down into something more palatable, more consistent, more honest, and more truthful. We used to have pagan religions, primitive religions centered around the worship of totems, the belief that lightning flashing across the sky and thunder were evidence of God's displeasure. Some people still believe this, of course. But as society grew more organized, religion had a tendency towards monotheism because the monotheistic God replicated the structure of state authority, the single emperor, the single pharaoh, the single king. And we have now moved into a point in the world, one of representative democracy now, where I no longer believe religion serves or reflects the interests of humanity. I would like to move this in a more pragmatic discussion, if I may, because I would like to ask you today, in this day and age, what good does a religious framework bring us? I know the arguments that you can't have morals without religion. I certainly hope you're not about to accuse me of being amoral. I know the arguments that it is religion which gives us the social cohesion. I would argue again with Durkheim that there are many social institutions which replicate that process of unification without bringing with them all the nasty superstition of religion. I want to make the world a better place. And in order for me to do that, I need to be able to analyze the social structures within which we live and decide which one of them are worth keeping, removing, and which need to be changed. And I cannot for the life of me think of a reason why religion, in a broad hypothetical sense, should be removed.
Good question. All right. Josh, how would you answer that?
All right. Well, I think Christianity provides a moral framework to which to judge competing ideas. It also explains the overall balance of reality. Hold on, before we go to that question, let's get back to the overall things that Christian theism explains as opposed to anti-theism. You said nothing of the traditional arguments for the existence of God. Look, these big questions like where did the universe come from? Why do I exist? Where am I going? Christian theism provides a rich philosophical and theological answer to that. Marxism says all if history is inevitable. This is something Karl Marx even grappled with. But I do believe that there is something going on in history, a historic development. So you have the primitive religions in the beginning, right? And then you start having more, then you start having polytheism and so forth. And you eventually get to monotheism. Just as science develops through the ages, it is belief in God, a more sophisticated understanding of theism. These arguments have also become
I don't know if I just cut out or
with reality.
No, I'm just enjoying the silence.
It's
Josh,
a lull. Yeah,
Josh,
just breathe in the lull because
you're cutting out.
Reset something.
Okay. If you're not going to deal,
Wi-Fi.
There we go.
I said, if you're not going to deal seriously with the past and try to rebut any of these arguments, and think that the future comes by inevitable, circumstances, which Marxism says, then you don't have a coherent philosophical worldview, a worldview that accounts for lived life as well. So I think Thomas Reid answers that.
For one, I do not dispute the wealth of knowledge that Christian philosophers have brought us. Okay, Hume, you mentioned Hume earlier. I've read, well, not all of Hume, obviously, but I've engaged with the literature, one might say, because I do not believe that religion is a necessary part of modern social systems. That doesn't mean that religious people in the past have not had insightful things to say on society and on epistemology just because they're religious. I have to speak to your assertion of historical inevitability. It's true that modernist philosophies such as Marxism have a tendency towards leading one down the road towards historical inevitability. But to be fair, it's been 150 years. I'm not just a Marxist, I'm a postmodernist in that respect. Different disparate social frameworks competing for power and intrigue in the mind of the public consciousness. The issue that I have, I feel, debating these issues with religious people is that I am very much grounded in the needs of the people who live today. That is what I care about. I will be perfectly honest. I don't care how the universe began. It was 6 7 billion years before I was born. Probably, I don't know the number. And I will die very long before we discover anything new or interesting about the formation of the universe. What I'm interested in materially is making people's lives better and easier. And when I try to do that, I often find that religious superstition or bigotries enabled by the facade of divine approval are one of the biggest obstacles. Religious fundamentalists, Protestant fundamentalists in America today are one of the biggest threats to modern civilization, in my mind, period. The extent to which their superstition and their unwillingness to get in line with what is scientific consensus threatens all of us. Not just about things like, say, global warming, where they believe that, God's land, the earth, given to us as a paradise, is ours to do with what we will. Not just about, say, the state of Israel, which many religious fundamentalists believe the Jews need to control the Holy Land in order for the rapture to begin. So we engage in an imperialist war of aggression across the Middle East to defend that, what one might say, death cult. The problem that I have really is that every time I try to talk about whether or not religion does good for society, I get bogged down with these really nuanced epistemological arguments, which have, and I know this, been debunked or dealt with by other more recent philosophers, or there have been competing theories, which are, at least in my mind, a little bit more convincing. I do not purport to contain within my mind the knowledge of every epistemological philosopher who has ever done work to undo the damage religion has done to the human mind. All I can say is that as a person who is interested in making life better for myself and for everyone else, what does religion offer me?
Now, Josh, answer that question directly that he talked about. He just what does religion offer someone? How would you answer that? Nothing. Right. Good.
Oh dear.
Good. I think that's a
Did
good
he
answer,
hear any
Josh.
of that?
That's a good answer.
It was on mute. You're breaking up a lot. I could barely
I think it's on
hear
your
you.
end.
I was listening, but when I was listening
That's-
and heard enough, I've debated for a while now. I think that's a woefully, inept argument. I didn't really notice any arguments in there. You did
Inept?
mention
Josh,
Hume.
Josh, he
Now,
asked you a
Hume
question.
Josh, come on.
What does religion
Josh,
offer
come on.
someone?
Yeah.
He asked you a question.
Hume, let me finish. Hume has
And I
had
got to tell you, I have
lots
I
of
got to tell you,
critiques,
Josh.
including Thomas Reed.
Why are you quoting somebody again?
Go ahead.
He asked you a question, and first of all, I know a little about these topics, and I can certainly tell you nothing he said so far would ever lead me to conclude that he's inept in any of this stuff by any stretch of the imagination, Josh. So that rhetoric is really going against you. Trust me. Nobody's going to listen to this and think that he's inept in what he's talking about, because he's pretty much spot on in everything I've heard so far. But he asked you a very direct question along the lines of, he paraphrased it again, but basically, what does religion offer nowadays? That especially that can't be brought about by some other means, like humanism.
Oh, what? First of all, Christianity gives a coherent philosophical and epistemological foundation. Thomas Reed held to something called, again, a broad foundationalism. Now, you can't even have an epistemology if you don't have something to ground your metaphysics. Christianity has a ready answer for why something exists rather than nothing, or why we can do science or discover natural laws. That is, there's a grounding.
Explanations. It's very easy
that
to
is
make
that
them
God exists to ground those things.
Josh, listen. If I don't know if it broke up with when he was talking, or when he said that he doesn't care about things like why the universe began. He's worried. His concern is with how religion affects people today. For example, the discrimination that is caused by religion, that sort of thing. Can you speak to that issue, like how religion affects people today in terms of preventing them from whether it be from getting abortions to LGBTQ aspects, how is religion affecting people today in a positive way?
Well, I think it gives people a moral basis to look at themselves in not a false self-esteem type of way, but says they're created in the image of God, that there is a standard to which to judge by, to which to look to. It's no accident that history has been framed by the person of Jesus. I'm thinking of numerous books. I'm not going to quote. I know y'all don't like me to do that, but even today, people they live according to this hierarchy of values. In atheism, all of these values in this hierarchy that everybody has, it's completely vacuous. So Christianity in particular gives people a foundation to which to rest their philosophical views of morality, of objective morality.
Okay, I guess it's going to go with the morality argument. Vaush?
It is easy to build a consistent epistemological framework. There have been dozens throughout history, humanity's history, with varying levels of consistency. Most of them have some sort of pitfall. For example, the Christian epistemological framework is largely consistent. Most most currently practiced religions have a consistent epistemological framework that has room within it for respect to things like empirical scientific pursuit. However, I'm not arguing against that. What I'm arguing against is the idea that there aren't epistemological frameworks which are superior and cause less harm. I can give an example, okay? Here is how I ground my morals. And I think a lot of people do this, even people who purport to be religious. They just then justify this moral system with religiosity, okay? I'm a rule utilitarian, okay? I want to support actions which have good consequences and which will enable good consequences in the future. My sort of axiomatic value is that I want to maximize well-being for creatures capable of experiencing it. Humans seem to be able to do that the most. Jury's out on whether or not grass screams in pain when you step on it. So, with that in mind, with that idea that the good thing to do is to make people capable of feeling good, feel good, I can build out a massive framework of morally consistent, epistemologically justified systems that I can use in law. I can use them in ethics. I can use them in both virtue and rule ethics. I can use them in basically every respect religion is capable of imposing its values. The difference is I don't have any niggling negative consequences we have to deal with, like, say, superstitious belief, or, say, believing in an afterlife which cannot be empirically proven to exist, or, say, for example, the tribalism innate to religious belief. To believe, by the way, that your values are so intrinsically, cosmically just that you will be sent to eternal paradise as long as you follow them is an axiom which justifies barbaric action. Especially if you believe you're converting others. I mean, what then is the material pain of the tortured Indian compared to the eternal salvation they might find if they repent and pledge themselves to Jesus in their final moments before the flames consume them? Religion has bad outcomes. Some good, mind, but plenty of bad ones. But the epistemological framework I bring to the table doesn't, and it serves society way more functionally than religion ever could.
Yeah, I don't think so. Just as religion can be taken to extreme, science, and especially Marxism, can be taken to the extremes. And this has been demonstrated time and time again in the 20th century. More than 100 million people were killed in the name of atheism and Marxism and views like that. So I think if you're going to come to a common sense understanding of history,
they weren't like fatwas done in the name of atheism.
Let me finish, with all due respect. Then you're going to have to come to grips with the historic, inevitable consequences of Marxism. If you really think that history can be approved upon itself and not just it's inevitable, as Marxism claims, then you're going to look to theology. How can we improve to the next day and to the next day? Now, you bring up superstitions. That's, again, you're smuggling in David Hume. But that, again, talks about the natural theology and philosophy. All these arguments and history itself shows that Hume was not a sophisticated thinker. In his own time, Thomas Reid and Richard Whatley and Samuel Clarke and William Paley and other 18th and 19th century philosophers dealt with Hume. So you mentioned consequential utilitarianism. If you believe in God, you want the greatest well-being for the greatest number of people. Here's the difference. Belief in God as an epistemological foundation gives people a basis why we should improve their well-being rather than just a postmodern feel-good view or a Marxist inevitable historical view. Okay. So theism is far superior.
I gotta step in here. First of all, listen, true blue Marxist, okay? Proletarian revolution win. First of all, the 100 million statistic has been widely disputed. Second of all, none of this was done in the name of atheism. There were not atheist fatwas or jihads that were called out by atheist parishioners standing atop stadiums telling everyone that in the name of atheism, everyone else must be killed. This never happened and never has happened. And even if it did
disprove that.
Josh.
Even if it did happen, it wouldn't change my argument, because I would argue that the people who did so were not operating within the grounds of my epistemological framework. You say that there are things which my epistemological framework can't account for, that it can't give people, but I'm struggling to find such an example. Can you give me an example of a current problem, a modern kerfluffle of some kind that I would not be able to navigate my way out of ethically in a morally consistent way?
Your epistemological framework can't distinguish between an it statement and an ought statement. G.E. Moore, who I'm sure you're familiar with, he discusses this in his article. It's called Common Sense, a defense of common sense, and I hope you read it. He also discusses it in other places. There's simply no way you can differentiate an it statement from an ought statement without having some philosophical grounding to which to judge or differentiate between epistemological statements. Marxism, because it's a historical inevitable position,
Josh,
and postmodernism doesn't account for any.
1 second.
Wait. For one, I've already said I am a postmodernist in this respect. I'm Marxian somewhere. It's complicated. Postmodern literature and philosophy.
Here's an easy answer: be a theist.
Josh, don't make me have to mute you, please.
It's really not, though, because what you just said to me is that you made two statements, both of which were dumb. One of them you said was that I can't differentiate between an is and an ought statement. What? According to my epistemological framework. According to my epistemological framework. Oh, is that? Oh, sorry. According to this, the epistemological framework that I hold, it is morally wrong for people to be treated worse than they would otherwise based on the color of their skin. However,
why?
I know people are treated because, according to my axiomatic value, I want to maximize good for the greatest number of people. And in order to maximize good, I have to make consistent epistemological and empirical arguments as to how inequality and hierarchy, this is why I'm an anarchist, fundamentally stand against the ability for humans to maximize their well-being. If I need is the ground. Well, wait, because you said two dumb things, and I'm done with one. You say I don't have a grounding. Your grounding is every bit as arbitrary as mine. My grounding is rooted in my grounding is rooted in, well, that's the thing. Both of us have an axiomatic justification, an unsupported supposition that we have to put forward, okay? I have to make the supposition that there is intrinsic, universal, cosmic good to making people feel good. That goodness is in and of itself good. And everything else in my life can be borne out to justify that. Human civilization is built to serve our needs. You, however, have an equally arbitrary but much more complicated epistemological framework, which relies upon the words of texts written hundreds of years after the death of somebody purported to be the child and also the same person as a deity that created the universe 6,000 or so years ago. The degree of arbitrariety with which you need to imbue your epistemological framework is thousands of times more complicated than mine. All I have to do is say, I think that feeling good is good. Now, from then we move on. you're proselytized. This is why we got Sunday school. You've got to learn about your system. And it grows more arbitrary with every day. Why do some people choose to follow these rules from the Bible but not other rules? Why is it that we prioritize we can swear here, right? I apologize.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Fuck no.
Okay. Why do we
sorry.
why do we prioritize like the 18th King James edition of the Bible rather than making a serious effort to dig up and reinterpret like the original Hebrew version? Why don't we follow the Old like there are so many arbitrarities there that I can ignore because mine is so simple. It's so clean.
Josh?
Did bring up
Maybe you can
any
unmute.
Bible verses. Notice that I never did bring up any Bible verses, or I'm not using the Bible to justify anything. Mine's a broad Thomas Reedian foundationalism, the same Thomas Reed that replied to Hume and obliterated his arguments, not to mention others who I mentioned. I gave also arguments from natural theology to give a justification for my epistemology. Never once have you talked about any of these arguments from natural theology, from the beginning of the universe, or the fine-tuning, moral, historical arguments for miracles. You haven't said anything. In fact, you can't say anything because your view is historic inevitability.
I've already talked. I said
you
it's not.
can
that
simply
was
ask why is a certain thing wrong under
Josh, you're
your
not paying any attention
worldview
to what he's
if you
saying.
have
You're not
if you
listening.
have
You're
no
really not, Josh.
anchor.
Josh,
If you
let me
have
break
no
in real quick
anchor
because
to
you're
make
talking
it
about
objectively wrong, you can simply ask that question.
Josh, you're going down another rabbit hole. I don't know, and I'm going to try to get this on point a little bit more because Vaush is basically talking about his foundational belief system. Okay, he said he was a utilitarian. I don't know if you know what a utilitarian is.
Yes.
But if you need to explain to you, okay, so utilitarian, most people don't know, basically is just somebody who adheres to the principle that whatever rule is in a society should be followed because it leads to the greater good of the society. So it's based upon the rule itself rather than the actual consequences of the rule, but the adherence of the rule. But you're talking now about the Kalam cosmological argument. You're talking about fine-tuning arguments. They have nothing to do with his epistemology.
Without presuming some basis for which to ground that in.
What's that, Vaush?
Oh well, I just want to say because I feel like I have engaged perhaps somewhat unfairly because it seems like we want to have two separate discussions. And this is something that I get a little bit frustrated with when I argue with religious people, because I can talk empirically about how in today's society, religion causes more harm than it does good, and my epistemological framework can lead to much greater good. And I have never in my life heard a religious person explain to me how there's some preeminent gap or flaw in the system of values which I produce. But then when this happens, they bring out these incredibly esoteric, nuanced epistemological arguments made for people who are trying to justify a belief they already had. Do we know about justifying things after the fact and ad hoc justification? None of these religious thinkers were like atheistic or neutral, and then they thought upon a system of epistemological grounding, and then they were like, naturally, it justifies God. They were people who already believed in God and spent their life trying to justify it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they were wrong, but if I have to engage with centuries of epistemological literature, then let's do this quick, okay?
That's a simplistic argument.
From where do you derive your ethical system? Josh? I guess that's as good an answer as any.
No, yeah. I did not hear. I thought I replied.
Where do you derive your ethical
system?
You're
talking about simplistic thinkers like Isaac Newton or Kepler or Galileo.
Josh, we're switching gears. Vaush, will you please ask your question again? Answer this question.
I just want to know, from where do you derive your values? Where does that come from? Where do you build your epistemological framework from?
The same way as Thomas Reed, from common sense realism. And that's why I brought up Thomas Reed numerous times, because he responds to what you said about David Hume and this belief in verificationism, the view that you have to that you could only true knowledge is from the five senses, or that can be empirically verified. That statement is something we don't live on a daily basis.
Well, hold on. I'm not. Don't make us. I'm not a. I'm a scientific anti-realist. I'm not a positivist. I agree that everything that we decide, every rule, every system, everything, from whether or not my desk is made of wood to what the name of trees are to how many sexes there are in the human species, all of these things are at least to some extent socially constructed. There's no true empirical knowledge. But for the sake of practical operational definitions, some things seem to work pretty consistently. The 5 senses method seems to work pretty consistently for bringing about results, whereas the greatest religious prophets and diviners in history have consistently failed to produce miracles.
That's
so
if we step away, that I could say that about Marx's view of history being inevitable. We don't live that way. We think history is a progression that it can be improved on. In Christianity, as far as history goes, is far superior to your Marxian dialectic of historical inevitability. It's also, let me finish, it's also superior to a postmodern view that says there is no truth, there is no absolute truth, all is relative. To make that statement, you need to presuppose a transcendent vantage point to which to rest your what you say about
okay, that is a wild mischaracterization of postmodernism. But I'm sorry.
This is bizarre. This is like really bizarre.
Well, I need to ask, where do you derive? You said you derive them from common sense realism. Okay, what about common sense realism affirms for you the existence of a deity, the tenets of the Bible, and so on and such forth? What about that leads to your belief in the religious scripture from which you derive your epistemological framework?
Well, I go from Thomas Reid. I read his book, An Inquiry into the Human Mind on the Principles of Common Sense, and he defended the cosmological and the teleological argument. All of the premises in those arguments are so sound.
Why can't you answer the question not based on what Reid or Hume or anybody else has said? What does Josh believe? Where does Josh derive?
I believe in the principles of common sense, but it has to rest on some foundationalism, right? Some metaphysics.
Where do you get that from? Okay. Wait, where do you get that from? Because I need to clarify.
For God, you have to presuppose God for the existence of the universe and the design of the universe.
Well, Dave. Wait, I need to clarify. When I'm asked, how do you get your epistemological framework? I have 2 ways of answering that. One, excuse me. One, I could say, oh, well, I read a bunch of books and I learned a bunch about rule utilitarianism, and I realized that you have to make an unjustified supposition to base a moral framework upon. So, now I am this. Or I could answer, how do you get your moral framework? Well, I made this is called an unfounded assumption, an unjustified axiom, an unjustified presupposition. I made one. I cannot prove empirically that there is intrinsic good in making people feel good. I couldn't do it. Not in a million years I couldn't do it, okay? But I can make arguments that as living beings, we generally like the outcomes of that axiomatic design. We like civilizations that are built to meet the needs of human happiness. By and large, that's what human civilization has always been about. They're not always consistent in this respect, but we're getting better.
Empirically, we live as though God does exist and as if Christianity were true, and you do also.
I promise you I do not.
Well, you have a hierarchy of values, right? And you think the hierarchy exists and that you should follow that hierarchy, that it's more valuable than not following it.
It's an unjustified presupposition. I acknowledge that I have no empirical grounding, just as you have no empirical grounding for your belief in the existence of God.
The view that only statements that are empirically grounded are true is not itself empirically grounded, but it comes via the principles of common sense. So empiricism is a helpful tool, but so is intuition and trusting our cognitive abilities. So why can't we, via those three ways,
what can intuition bring us that reason cannot?
A coherent foundationalist concept that includes the existence of God.
No, I'm sorry. I got to do this to you. Here's the problem with your way of thinking, okay? Everything that I believe in can be made consistent and rational by adding on to the unjustified presuppositions I have to lay out for an epistemological framework. Earlier, I said that I have a foundational belief in logic as it functions. A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. I can't justify that in an existential sense, but it seems to work 99.999 repeating percent of the time, so we're going to stick with it, okay? The problem is that there are
That's
a
a faith
million.
statement.
It is not a faith statement to say that it is most likely that something
You
which is almost
trust. You
always
trust
or
in your
always.
cognitive abilities.
Josh, didn't I
Yes,
say at the beginning not to interrupt?
it is an unjustified presupposition, just like the one you've made. Let me throw up some arguments for you that might sort of, I don't know, indicate the potential for
Wait,
arbitrarity in
if
your
we're
belief
going to go
system.
to if we're going to go
Josh,
to arguments, shouldn't we go
Dave,
with the argument?
Dave, please mute Josh. Josh, listen, I have to treat you like a child if you're going to act like one. If you can't keep yourself from interrupting, that's my biggest pet peeve. Just let each other finish their thought. He wasn't done talking. That means that you don't start. Okay, I will unmute you when he is done, and then I will continue to mute you if you continue to interrupt. I don't want to do that, but I will. All right, go ahead,
I
boss.
just want to say that the idea that something which happens all of the time is itself a logical truism is a matter of faith. It is an unjustified presupposition, something every human being has to make in order to make the world make sense. We were not endowed with the ability to understand the universe at its most foundational level. We're just big bloated meat blobs that wander around on the surface of a desolate rock hurtling through space. We're doing great considering those circumstances, but we are nonetheless limited by the bounds of biology. But let me pose to you some possibilities that might throw up a loop in, say, your ability to interpret the will of God. How do you know that you're not a madman chained by the arms to one's chest in a bedlam asylum, and everything that you are arguing right now, all of these epistemological frameworks, even the argument you're having right now in this podcast, aren't instead the musings of your deluded and unsalvageable mind? Can you prove to me empirically that this is not the case?
I can't prove to you empirically, but again, we live our lives according to common sense. Here's why Christian theism is superior to anti-theism. It accounts for common sense here and today, but it also accounts for history, things in the past. It also accounts for how the universe began to exist, why something exists rather than nothing, why the grounding of morality. So it answers or explains a whole spectrum of phenomena that your view, doesn't.
Wait, just because you explain something doesn't mean you're right. I can explain everything in the universe and still be wrong. The act of explaining something has no value in my mind, nor does it in the mind of any reasonable person. The explanation must be justified, and there is no way to justify the explanations given by Christians to explain the metaphysical. They make an unjustified presupposition, just like I do. But again, and this is the important distinction, your unjustified presuppositions lead to a mountain of negative outcomes when applied to modern society. Superstitious belief, a disbelief in the empirical. We can take a look at global warming. We can take a look in the belief that certain actions are justified because there's a life after death, something which none of us can prove. Everything you're saying that Christianity provides, which is beneficial, I can do the same atheistically, and I can do it without all of the negative hangups. I don't know what you mean by common sense. Common sense is generally a truism invoked to shut down thought. But if you're talking about like people's ability to make reasonable statements out of experienced stimuli, then they can absolutely do that under my framework. You talk about explaining history. Well, I admit, I do not know how the universe began, but not knowing something does not mean you have a carte blanche justification to make up whatever whimsical story you want and say because you have provided an explanation that your system is superior. I know that I don't know everything. I don't purport to know what happens after death. I don't purport to know what happened at the beginning of the universe or even what began life on this planet. There are explanations, and some of them seem reasonable, but I can't know that. All I know is that in the very finite lifespan that I have on this planet, we live in a planet languished with poverty, misery, discrimination, and institutional violence. And I can help those people at least a little bit. And I can do it through my framework. I could do it through your framework too, but it would be a worse one.
Well, I think we should help people because what we do on this earth, and we'll come back to this earth, that's the Christian belief of the resurrection of the dead. has eternal significance or eternal implications. If you live your life as there's no hope, there's no objective hope, then you're going to live it destructively. And there's not going to be a basis for why you act in a certain way.
Need to go over this point by point.
You talk about, let me finish. You talk about metaphysics. Well, we have every reason to believe that whatever begins to exist has a cause. Let me finish. The universe began to exist, or the universe has a cause.
Josh, I'm going to let you get back to your point, but before we move on too far, he wants to speak about that first part that you.
Why don't I get to finish?
I'm going to let you finish. I'm interrupting you because
I'm writing down the points as we go, so we can discuss them.
Okay. Well, here's why let me just explain why I'm interrupting you, Josh. Because you jump from point to point to point to point to point when it's your turn. You cover like so many different and varying aspects that it's hard if we don't, like, if he's not writing it down, to stop and sort of talk about that one point.
You want me to talk slow for you, Vaush? When you talk about the beginning of the universe, the commonsensical notion is that being doesn't come from non-being. If you really believe that the universe came into existence without a cause, you believe in magic, Vaush.
Wait, no, whoa. For one, I never. Wait. For one, I never said the universe came from nothing. I said I don't know, which is the only empirically founded statement any reasonable person can make. I never said that it came from nothing. Where did God come from? I don't know. There are plenty of metaphysical nonsense trickery arguments religious people have to engage in.
Yeah, you can't keep asking for an explanation of the explanation, or you would get an infinite amount of explanations that never accounted for anything. So, for example, if we found a spaceship a spaceship on Mars, we wouldn't say, well, we don't know who invented it, so therefore we can't explain this spaceship on Mars. No, we're going to use common sense and say that it was put there for a reason. This is what we do in our everyday life, boss.
No, you have to. If we found a spaceship on Mars, there are a wide variety of empirical testing methods that we could engage in to try and determine its origin.
It has to be interpreted.
Dave,
no, it does. Listen, this is the God of the gaps argument. The idea that just because we can't explain something means that God must be responsible for it. We used to say the same thing about the rain, or about lightning, or about the size of the earth, or about how the day and night work. As time has gone on, all of these explanations that used to be attributed to the existence of the gods have faded away, as we have found empirical explanations for everything that has taken place. Now, because we are humans and not ourselves gods, I don't think we're ever going to be able to objectively determine the origins of the universe or the origins of life. We weren't around back then. But it seems to me like if we're going by historical track records, every single time we make an advance in knowledge, science and empirical analysis overtakes religious superstition.
And by the way, you have to presume the regularity of nature. That's why science developed in Western Europe once and only once. There have been lots of scientists who have discussed this, but the origin of the universe deals with a particular one-time historical event. So you don't use
are we really going to do this?
Are we really to decide Kyle, there? You use common sense that non-being can't come.
Is this our new reality? Is this it? I don't know what the fuck's going on here.
My problem is I feel like I'm being very charitable here. For one, the argument that science was invented
way charitable
is incredibly disingenuous. The golden age of Islam was, proportional to its time, one of the most miraculously progressive, inventive, and productive civilizations in the history of humans. In fact, I've heard historians argue that proportional to the available resources at the time and the progression of history, the golden age of Islam was more impressive than the Enlightenment. And if the two events had taken place in reverse, it is entirely likely that we would attribute to all things the genius and wonder of the Islamic mind, which I would disagree with as well, of course, because I don't believe religion created the golden age of Islam. I believe people did. My problem here is that I am very grounded in this issue, this foundational, how does religion serve human interest in this day and age? And then you hit me with the unironic God of the gaps argument and the suggestion that if people with an empirical mind, atheistic people, discovered a rocket ship on Mars, that we would, like, our brains would twist into a pretzel rather than trying to, like, figure it out and suss out that information based on the available empirical evidence. Science and humanity is moving ahead of your values. Eventually, religion as you know it will be dead. Much in the same way that 1,000 years ago, religion as it was practiced then is dead. Religious people today are nothing like religious people 1,000 years ago, even if they were still Christian or Jewish or, well, Islam wasn't around back then, but nonetheless, still. Time moves on, and the only consistency to human civilization is humans, not Christianity, not epistemological frameworks. I live in 2019, and I want to make the world better now. I am not going to let your unfounded explanation as to how the universe may have been created via routing it through the suppositions made in a religious text that was written over the course of hundreds of years after the death of somebody who was a prophet. No. I want to know what makes the world better now. I want to know how the world is made better in this moment. There are plenty of epistemological philosophers out there who have diced the religious arguments that have been made by you, by very great and intelligent men, mind you. But as the Marxian says, history moves forward, and we must now contend with new ideas. And the ideas I want to contend with are, how do we deal with human unhappiness, inequality, discrimination, institutional violence, poverty, starvation, bigotry, intolerance, and superstition? What does religion do for me?
Dealt with David Hume's arguments right then. Now, if you're going to say time moves on, then it can't move on in Marxism because history is inevitable. You're going to have to look at history in a progressive way, that it improves. This is the conception that Christianity gave. This is what led to the university system again. This is what led to the different educational systems, the status of women being elevated in the first century. There's so many of these arguments you're not taking into consideration, and how we live our life depends a lot.
You haven't answered one of his arguments, not one, and he led off with several very good questions. I'm so frustrated because, I would expect that as somebody who calls himself Apologist Supreme, that you have sort of a basis by which you can answer these relatively simple, easy questions that he's asking you. He's asked you very straightforward, very specific questions, and you go off on shut the fuck up. You keep going on in these directions that have nothing to do with the question that he asked you. And I have to think to myself that it's because he's asking the right questions and they're hitting at a point to where I think you're trying to convince an answer.
Well, no, he's not convincing himself. He's convincing us, because I would agree with Kyle 1,000%. Josh,
you already presupposed the non-existence of God.
You did not answer a single direct question this entire time. Matter of fact, the tangential things you talked about were irrelevant to the point of almost being nonsensical. I mean, it's like he would say something and you would respond to him, oh, but the Riemann conjecture hasn't been solved yet, therefore your moral ontology is completely flawed. It's just nonsense. And I mean, we're going to go into the after show, and I'm explaining all the terminologies that you completely got wrong, but you didn't address a single thing that he was arguing. He's arguing this at a level way up here. You're like down here just throwing things out, hoping something will connect. And it doesn't. It's not connecting at all, man.
Anti-theist versus theism. Am I right in that?
Well, I need to jump in on this. I don't even necessarily argue from the position that I know God doesn't exist. Only that by the systems by which I believe we reach conclusions, I do not think it is reasonable to believe God exists. But if it turned out God
out of
exists,
practical necessity, right?
No, not out of practical necessity. Much in the same way that it's not a matter of practical necessity for me to not believe that elves live in the crook of trees and are invisible to the human eye. It's not a matter of necessity.
That they don't.
If
we don't observe it by our cognitive intuitions. We trust our cognitive abilities.
Do we observe God to exist? Am I missing it? Is he? Am I? I know I have bad vision. These are thick lenses. Did I miss it? Did I miss God?
If you're thinking God is somehow a physical object. That's a caricature.
Right, well, no, I understand. No.
Common
Very good.
sense.
Because originally, back before we had all the maps crossed out, gods physically existed in the world. But then,
it progressed with time. With time,
scholars realized there was no longer
we got a more sophisticated understanding with the progression of time. Just as the sciences became more progressively sophisticated, the existence of God became more progressively sophisticated.
Mute, Josh.
It wasn't a more sophisticated argument. It was one which could coexist with the burgeoning development of human reason. Religious scholars were like, oh, well, shit. Clearly, there are no miracles. There's no empirical evidence of the existence of God. We've traveled from one corner of the earth to another, and we haven't found any empirical evidence that he exists. People are starting to unearth like dinosaur, but like, ooh, things are getting shaky over here. Actually, God is a metaphysical spirit that cannot be observed directly, and faith is the only way. Listen, again, I have nothing against unjustified presuppositions, okay? The difference is that mine is better than yours. And I keep asking you over and over and over again, without relying on a God of the gaps argument that because reason cannot at this moment explain the origins of the universe, therefore he must exist, God, without relying on that fallacy, can you please explain to me a single point, what right now in 2019 religion does better than my epistemological framework could?
And before you answer this, Josh, I think we need to make things a little more fair here. So in the chat, SJ has been clamoring to throw in on this. So we're going to bring SJ in too to see what she can offer and maybe help this conversation out a little bit. Josh,
what are their leanings?
What's that?
What are their leanings? Who's SJ? What are we? Boomer, Zoomer, SJ, religious, not religious?
SJ is religious, yes.
All right, I'm ready.
But see, I don't bring them.
Which is actually a religious apologist, but
yeah, I don't think that we're getting anywhere with Apologist Supreme. I mean, so I want to sort of in the final moments here get to a sort of a place where we can have a little bit of somewhat meaningful.
Wait,
discussion.
This is the person who was complaining that I'm a Marxist. Yes, I'm ready.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of, sort of. Although she asked me if I was a Marxist, and I was like, look, I'm not a Marxist, but I do understand there's things about Marxism that I don't disagree with. I mean, you talked about dialectics, and especially the dialectic materialism and its relationship to the Hegelian dialectics, which I think are really bizarre, but I do accept that for social and economic change that dialectic materialism makes sense, but I don't take it as an economic standpoint. Does that make sense? It probably makes sense to you, Vaush.
I haven't even unveiled my power level, okay? I'm not just a Marxist. I'm a postmodern anarcho-syndicalist.
He's not even in his full form yet. He's not in his final form. He's not in his final form.
I'll do it all. Trying to argue,
but I also agree with you while we're waiting for SJ. Hang on, Josh, you had your time. While we're waiting for SJ, I do agree with you about your foundationalism as far as your axiomatic, properly basic beliefs. I do agree that we all kind of have to take those under unjustified assumptions. I don't call them irrational, or don't call them irrational. I call them irrational beliefs. So they're neither rational nor irrational, but they are unjustified. Normally you need justification for a rational belief, but certain things are not justifiable. They're not justifiable what's called by inferential justification or by doxastic justification. So when we say certain things are irrational, it just basically means we take it axiomatically and we take it foundationally. I got no issue with that. When he asked you, Josh, what your epistemology was, you started going into what's called common sense realism. But by the way, common sense realism, I don't think that you were using it the way I would particularly use the term. Common sense realism to me is naive realism, which I deny. I don't think naive realism exists. I do tend more to scientific anti-realism, or specifically more to scientific instrumentalism. But I don't know how you, and one of the things that's bugging me, I'm getting it out. You kept saying he was a verificationist. Verificationism is a thing for logical positivism. The logical positivists would say that things are only cognitively meaningful if they're able to be proven true or false, and through a process called verificationism. But the problem with verificationism, it is self-refuting. That's why they don't use verification any longer, because you can't verify verificationism because it's begging the question by doing so. So
you can't apply the scientific method to the scientific method. We can't make
exactly
statements about the nature of human reason, but we can say, generally speaking, things seem to work when we take this approach.
Yeah, that's why I'm a scientific instrumentalist. The theories work, right? They observe something, they explain it, they make accurate predictions, whether it's real or not. Whether there's some kind of naive realism that exists, I doubt, because I'm a color irrealist, and I think that triangles and colors don't exist. So I think most of reality doesn't exist. I also tend to mereological nihilism. So I'm with you on a lot of this stuff. That I'm an scientific anti-realist in that regard. So.
Yeah, I feel like this atheism versus religious argument tends to like boil down to, do you believe God is real or not? But I feel like not only is that tangential, I don't even believe it's relevant to the discussion. The fact of the matter is, any reasonable person has to concede the fact that whether or not you're religious, you have to make some unjustified assumptions about reality in order to function in daily life. And all I want to do is argue which of these epistemological frameworks does society the most good. And I can, if we like, I know we kind of avoided talking about this, but if we want to talk about like the empirical harm being done to society through religious justification right now, I got binders stacked up. I don't actually.
That's where I thought it was going to go. That's actually what I thought was going to be the crux of the discussion.
I'm fine with it.
I would have been fine with that too.
Sure, Josh, why not?
Why not?
Okay. The debate topic was anti-theism versus theism. I construed that as which is more plausibly true. So when I'm using common sense realism, I said we should look at it from a modest foundationalism that you use metaphysics to explain all the phenomena in the world. You explain history, you explain science, not an archaic God of the gap straw man, but you say science supports in the premises a philosophical argument for the existence of God. So in no way tonight am I using God as an explanatory answer for any of these arguments. I'm saying all of these arguments that I presented are more plausibly true under the existence of God rather than under atheism. As for a person how they live their life,
just an explanation means nothing.
How a person lives their life.
I want to ask both. I want to ask both you guys a question because we do a flat earthers a lot.
But I need to know, why are we talking about the plausibility of a presupposition which is by definition unjustified? Plausibility has nothing to.
No, it's not unjustified. Common sense shows that it's justified.
What?
Common sense shows that the universe did not come into existence out of nothing. That's what atheism is.
Okay, Josh.
No. Okay,
Josh,
no, I can't. All right, well, no, I can't.
Okay, you want to talk about that?
Literally nobody is saying the universe came from nothing. I have never seen Richard Dawkins put out a book saying God is wrong, the universe popped into existence. Okay, the answer is that we do not know, and not knowing is not in and of itself a bad thing. Also, S.J. Thompson just said, "Oh my God, I actually think Marxism does society good," and I gotta have SJ now. I gotta do it.
Okay, we're gonna get SJ in here, but Josh,
SJ is saying that she has to work early in the morning, so she's wanting to set up a future debate. With you
for a few minutes, SJ. Come on.
But we'll set that up.
So Josh, first of all, he's right on this. I've never met anybody that I can think of.
I think it's 423 and O.
Are you out of your mind?
Yeah, you're acing this. No, let him have it. Let him have it. Josh, you are acing this, man. You are like this is like no challenge for you, man. Totally. But let me ask you, Josh. Okay, first of all, again, I don't know anybody. I really don't know anybody that has said the universe literally came from philosophical nothing. I don't think anybody's made that argument. If there is,
hold on. You're wrong about that. Quit.
I'm not wrong on that. I'm telling you my personal experience. In my personal experience, I've not met anybody that I'm aware of to date that has argued that with me.
Wait, find out, Steve.
Do you know of anybody that wants to?
Then read a little bit. Read a little bit outside of
who has. Who has?
Just read a little bit.
Who has?
Yeah, like I don't read.
That. Quentin Smith, the prominent atheistic philosopher.
Quentin Smith,
Okay.
says that we came from absolute nothing.
He says the implications, if you believe in the Big Bang, that for an atheist, you have to believe it came from nothing and by nothing. It's in the book called Big Bang Cosmology.
Great. I don't believe that. Okay. I
can provide you with the quote.
He's never argued that with me.
With the reference.
No one who believes in empiricism can make a definitive, objective statement about where humanity came from. That's an incredibly idiotic presupposition, and it is not one which is founded by the principle.
Remember, I use history also. This is what this is how theism is advantageous over atheism. It can use agent causation or naturalistic causations. No, determine on the evidence.
700 people that are watching wouldn't agree that you won on this.
Okay, so John, I have a question, and this is going to be the end all question because this is really going to be the heart of the matter. Now, watch. I drop something, like I said, we're dealing with flat earthers, and it falls to the ground. He can explain it in a non supernatural way, in a completely materialistic fashion. I'm sure that he knows enough about theory of gravity that he can explain why that happened. You are taking it from a Christian point of view, right? A point of view that without God, this wouldn't have happened. Why is your assumptions that God has to exist to make that to happen, that it fell, and something that you have to add on as an additional assumption, not required in his naturalistic, paradigm? Why makes your assumption better that God is required for this to occur?
I don't think everything in reality you can just say, therefore God did it. But when you get to the big questions,
that's not
like
what I said,
where
Josh.
I came from or who am I, you have to
leave
my question. The existence of God as an explanatory answer. And I think it does answer these big questions better. But these little questions, I think we have a common sense notion that the laws
so you agree you don't need God. So wait. So you do not need God to explain this, right? God can completely not be a non-existent. It can be a non-factor. Gravity still works, correct?
Well, if there was no God, there would not be a universe.
That's a presupposition.
No, it's common. Well, it's common sense.
That is not common sense. That is a presupposition.
This is a thought-terminating cliche. Listen, all of the religious scholars of yesteryear are balking at this fucking flagrant ignorance of how basic logical argumentation works. Listen, there are so many faults here. There are so many faults. For one, why are you talking about the reasonability of an unjustified presupposition? That's literally irrelevant to formation. For two, how can you argue that the Christian God is the one responsible for the creation of the universe rather than, say, the Nordic pantheon? Okay? What if we lived in a different timeline where the Nords maintained their religious supremacy over the Scandinavian area, conquered the rest of Europe, and nowadays, oh yes, the Nordic pantheon are actually spiritual entities that exist everywhere at once, but still the sun rises and sets in accordance with, I don't know, the one who rode it across the chariot. There are so many unjustified presuppositions. You know what else was unjustified? That 423 and 0, okay? So I see where the thought process comes from.
Answer that.
You have failed on every level, not only to back up the epistemological framework you believe in, but also to apply what I believe is the important question here. How does religion serve the interests of humanity in any modern context? You lie when you say religion was the beneficiary of humanitarian rights. Are you kidding? There have been countless atrocities committed in the name of religion. Religious scholars were the ones arguing most fervently against forced slavery, against interracial relationships, against miscegenation, for a woman's place in the home. There are so many ways in which religion has been empirically harmful and epistemologically unjustified. So to hear you argue against these points, I don't know. It's like I'm arguing against a dark reflection, okay? Maybe I am the one trapped in Bedlam, hands bound to my chest, living out the manifestation of my own mind, okay? Because I could not imagine a more torturous way to spend my existence than listen to somebody who believes what you believe explain to me how my positions are unfounded because one guy wrote in a book that the universe came from nothing.
None of my arguments
he's saying that he's living in hell right now.
Bible verse, and I presented my arguments as a cumulative case. Not that any of my arguments prove everything, but in a cumulative case, they show it's more plausibly true that the universe began to exist, that there's fine-tuning, that there's a standard,
back on these things
an anchor for objective
Josh,
morality.
You're like a broken
that you
record.
can explain history, historical events. There's all types of things that Christianity
Oh,
explains
boy.
over and above
Okay, so
atheism.
let me
We're
do
gonna have to
this,
pull a
Josh.
plug on you.
Let those who
Josh, you're
cry
like a
the
broken record. So
irrationality of theism be henceforth and forever silent.
Okay,
For
Dave.
nothing could be more
Josh, we're gonna
irrational
have to do
than
this
atheism.
as a mercy. This is a coup de grace. Okay, this is a coup de grace. He just savagely tore
berated
your argument apart. I
My
thought this
ass
maybe would
hurts.
be a really good conversation based on the things with Red Pill Religion and what happened on Twitter. But Josh, I got to tell you, it was completely one-sided, like I've never seen since the Aaron and Ken Hovind discussion.
I do think you're trying to convince yourself on this. Remember, he didn't give any reply to any of my arguments.
Dude, your self-assessment is bizarre.
You know what? No,
you got wrecked.
I concede. 423-0. Okay, I don't want to break a record that clean. 423-0.
That's
okay?
true.
I concede.
Yeah. So there's a couple points, Josh. What if I made the argument? Hey, look at the sun goes from one side of the sky to the other, goes from east to west, and the reason being is because it cannot do that unless Apollo carries it on his chariot. Because I presuppose that. So if I said, well, if Apollo didn't exist, would the sun still go from the east to the west? And you say, well, you can't do that because Apollo exists. It's exactly the same argument. You're literally just saying that God exists.
My argument is to say that literally nothing would exist if you don't believe in metaphysics. Remember, he did not respond to that or any of these arguments.
Not having an explanation for something does not mean any explanation provided is more valid.
I also gave an argument that was untouched while we should believe in religion today, because the way we live our life with dignity and so forth gives us a reason an epistemological grounding of why.
You can live a life of dignity and hope just to try and act in the way which you believe will maximize your personal well-being and the well-being of those you can affect. I live a life of hopefulness. Trust me, buddy, I do not go to sleep every night hanging up my atheist hat and thinking, please, mercy, Lord, I'm sorry, I'm making money on the internet, okay? I promise you, but I do this all for you. I am very much agnostic in this respect, and I live a life of dignity, of hope, of morality, of kindness to those around me. The idea that life is
you live as though God does exist, and you borrow from a Christian worldview. I mean,
I know
that's not an idiom if I've ever heard it. That's like a right out of a Psi 10 idiom.
He suplexed me intellectually. I can't. No, it's good. No, it's good.
Yeah, I know,
okay,
man.
so wait. To reassess. So we completely ignore the conversation is for the empirical good and harm that religion does for society nowadays. God exists
people
because
hope.
It provides an explanation for the beginning of the universe, whereas not believing in God doesn't. And I'm wrong because I believe apparently in the inevitability of history and the non-existence of the universe up until an arbitrary point in time. And what's more, unjustified presuppositions can be determined by their plausibility. Apparently, that one's new. But listen,
you don't believe in historical improvement.
I'm learning a lot. I love learning.
Only Christianity gives a justification for historical improvement, for the well-being of a person, for why a person is objectively important. Atheism doesn't give you that.
I can justify that. I can. I can justify it with an unjustified presupposition.
Give me an argument.
I can make an unjustified presupposition that there is inherent goodness in maximizing well-being in sentient creatures, and you can make an unjustified presupposition that we live in a created universe looked over by a benevolent deity, and both of us can use our unjustified presuppositions to, okay, listen, however you want to characterize your religion, it's an unjustified presupposition, okay? Unjustified within the grounds of logic. There is no way for you to determine empirically the existence of God, nor, if there was, would there be any way for you to determine that the God that exists is the God described in the Bible and is not a Norse god or one of the Greek pantheon or some ancient fucking blood flesh pagan god that exists at the core of the earth and feeds the dead. There is no way for you to know. There's no way for anyone to know because metaphysics exists outside of our comprehension by definition. But in the day-to-day lives of human beings who walk this earth, who live, who birth, who die, I can make very compelling arguments for the ways in which my epistemological framework helps them live dignified, hopeful, fruitful lives. And you can make a comparable argument. I'm not saying you can't make one at all, but your argument is fraught with a bunch of unnecessary downsides, which can be avoided by abandoning religion.
He's got a point.
If there is no God, all they have is death to look to. So why should a person try to find
an argument and consequence
or try to live to the best of their ability?
No, you just made
What's the meaning of it under your worldview?
You just made an argument for feelings right there. You just dropped the game a little bit, buddy. You're terrified of you're afraid of death, so you want to believe in a system of thought that frees you from that anxiety. I live every day knowing that one day everything will come.
I keep hearing these caricatures of what Christianity is. Well, you said I quoted the Bible. Never once in this debate did I quote the Bible. In fact, I give a philosophical argument. Never once did I give a science of the gaps argument or God of the gaps. I use philosophical arguments.
He's done. He's been done.
Okay,
I'm sorry, Josh. We can't. I don't think we. I think we need to do a mercy. Vaush on this.
Yeah, we're about to.
No,
I'm gonna let Vaush finish out this.
This is something which I find like personally offensive because I know for a fact that my agnostic belief towards the existence of God does not mean that I live every day knowing that one day I'll die, and in all likelihood, all of this will come to an end. But I have things to look forward to. I'm gonna eat a sick ass fucking burrito when I'm done with this. I don't want to be too lascivious here. I get to have fun with my body for a good long time before I die. There are so many cool things that I get to do and get to look forward to. And then my only hope is at the end of all of it, when I'm there on my deathbed or, I don't know, dying in the street with a gunshot in my chest in the proletarian revolution, all I can do is think yeah, okay, I did pretty good. Okay. And then I stop existing forever. I'm fine with that. But I don't like the idea that you're like, oh, well, humans can't exist unless we're spared the fear of death. And then from that, you build like a whole system. I haven't even begun to talk about the way in which Christianity as an epistemological framework is inherently unethical. How the existence of God is the ultimate hierarchy. And as a anarchist, I fundamentally stand against that principle. The idea that you can punish people with hell for going against tenets that are not justified in the rational framework that people have to adopt to get by in their day-to-day life. There are so many depths. It's like fractal. You're like the Fibonacci sequence of irrationality, where I climb outward and outward, but there's never an end. There's only beautiful misinformation that spirals out into the cosmos.
Damn,
that's Josh.
I think
beautiful.
That was a mic drop moment. How can you argue against masturbation and burritos?
You can't, and
How do you? Well, my question is, how do you know which one to do first? Why not both?
Definitely the burrito.
Look, got to do both at the same time. Okay, listen, maximize the hedonistic pleasure in your life.
Now you're just going crazy, Vaush.
Yeah, and and the whole
Dave,
what's funny is this.
Dave was going to say something real quick, Steve, and then
go ahead, Dave. I was just going to say that Josh is gone. So,
okay, good. All right, Steve.
Okay. So here's the thing. Look at, there are some inevitabilities of existence, right? And if the inevitability, one, we all die. And if the inevitability means that is the end, and that's the case, right? The argument for consequence that that can't be it because reasons and appeal to some kind of emotional status is not, to me, rational. But the thing is we can still have value to our individual existence. We can still say that we have looking forward to promotion of society so that we have technology that can benefit man and humanity long after we're gone. We can contribute to society, each of us giving something to society that allows the benefit of all humans that have ever will exist after us to live a better life. What is wrong with that? Now, I know that kind of seems to be kind of a humanistic type vantage point, and in some way humanism, I agree with that aspect of it. But you certainly cannot argue with any kind of reason to say, just because I don't like the fact that we die, we may not, have existence afterwards, is not a justifiable foundation for rationality to formulate an epistemic framework. I'm sorry, it's just not.
Do you know what he sounded like,
Steve? Do you agree on that?
He sounded like a soundboard all night long. It sounded like somebody was behind the scenes just pushing a button, having him say a pre-recorded section.
That's how we do it. Josh wasn't even here. Dave was Dave was just pushing buttons of sound bites from Josh in other discussions.
Yeah.
Jig is up.
Vaush, I thank you for coming on. But I think next time, if you're willing to come back on, we'll get you in a conversation with somebody that actually comes with an argument.
Hey, listen, I honestly, I'll part the kimono here. I love debate for the sake of debate. There's nothing on earth more enjoyable to me. Yeah, there were some people. I got my eyes on you in chat, giving me shit for being a Marxist and an anarchist. I got my eyes on you. Okay, it may not happen soon. It may not happen on this podcast, but there's a reckoning coming. Okay, in the free marketplace of ideas.
I think that
dialectic social
I think
change.
we do need to set up you and SJ. I think that would be good. But I will say this: I don't think it's been a long time since we've seen this much of a just complete utter decimation of an interlocutor on here. And there's the fire, and the chat was going crazy for you. So if anything, I think you picked up a couple more fans. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Vaush. The link to his channel is in the description. Like he said, he likes the debate, and I think you'll see more really good. You are very very intelligent, and your arguments are well they're well conveyed, I think, in a way that usually, like, I would expect somebody like that calls themselves supreme apologist to be able to in some way give a little bit of a pushback, but it didn't happen tonight.
I have to make a bit of a disclaimer to anyone watching, and of course, and to both of you as well. This is literally the calmest I have ever been during a discussion. The majority of my discussions are not this calm. So if you can, whatever you see here, just amplify the volume somewhat, and with a lot more swear words, and we have how it tends to go. I don't want to misrepresent the content that I typically put out there.
Oh well, no, that's what we're used to here. So next time you come on, bring come as you are.
Well, if he's going to be against SJ, he doesn't need it. I wouldn't recommend that, because SJ, that doesn't really.
Well, SJ aside,
that wouldn't work. Yeah, if SJ aside, but anybody else would probably be perfect.
One of our
arguments are going to get my goat real hard. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. The people in the chat love the heat, so that's what they're used to. They we get a reputation of being a place for dumpster fires on occasion, and we're completely fine with that. There's going to be an after show. Steve is going to be hosted on Steve's channel. As always, the participants are invited. So Vaush, if I don't know what you're doing immediately after this, but we on debates like this, we usually have an after show where we bring other people in and sort of get some different angles on how things went and that sort of thing. So that will be immediately following this. And Josh, if you're out there, we be fair. You're invited if you want to come on. I'm a little disappointed that you rage quit. I don't blame you for rage quitting.
Did he? I thought he was just quiet. Did he leave deliberately?
Oh, he left. No, he left.
Oh no! Now I feel bad. I don't want to pick on the boomers.
Well, look.
To be fair, it doesn't say that he hung up. It just said call ended. So I don't know if he rage quit or Skype had a problem with all the bullshit that was flowing through.
I would be delighted to spend some time in the after show. I'm pretty hungry, but I destroy my body in worse ways than this. So yeah,
you have time to eat.
You're allowed to eat. You're allowed to eat and masturbate on my channel as long as the camera.
Right. It's a no. Look, that's why I keep the camera up here. Okay.
I got no standards on it.
Shoulder below, hand movements. It's all clear.
To be fair though, I would have rage quit a long time ago if I was him. Like he would have done better, I think, by rage quitting after the first 15 minutes, and that would have saved, I think, a lot of just questions that it's just there's so much to unpack here, which we will be doing here in just a few minutes. Well, I'm going to give Vaush an opportunity now to plug himself and his channel and any other like social media links that he has, and any kind of final thoughts that he would like to add to tonight's discussion. So as much time as you need, Vaush.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was delighted to be on here. I hope I can come on again in the near future.
Absolutely.
Most of my channel, I put out a ton of content, like 2 to 3 hours a day, because I stream really frequently. But most of it has to do with debunking reactionaries. People like Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder or Hunter Avallone or Tim Pool. People that make their living, whether on the internet or otherwise, spreading misinformation and promoting hate. I do that. I do it in a pretty edgy way. I'm actually ostracized from a good portion of the leftist community because a lot of left-leaning people are very, very cooey and kind of like snarky, and they're very like safe with the rhetoric, and I'm not. I got banned. I was the first major left-leaning political streamer to get banned off Twitch, and I did it for saying the United States should declare war on Israel and bomb them. So I don't.
Yeah, nothing controversial about that. Oh, yeah, that's
okay. But okay, listen, I was very angry at the time. Whatever the case may be, I like to think that I do decent work. And I would be delighted to see some or any of you in the channel. I stream 6 days a week, so I'm not exactly unreachable.
Excellent. Well, we would definitely have you back. Absolutely. I think everybody loved your arguments, and I've seen several comments about how smooth that voice is, and I have to agree. That is a pretty smooth voice. So
listen, it's one of the natural inequalities that as a true anarchist I seek to destroy. When the revolution comes, I'll smash my own windpipe with a hammer. So I too will enjoy the vocal talents of the rest of the population.
Now to be fair, I'm seeing that Supreme Apologist Supreme is calling back in. So I would be an awful host if I didn't give him the same opportunity to come in and plug himself and have a last minute thing. So Dave, if you would please reconnect with Apologist Supreme. I see that he's calling back in.
I didn't even get a chance to flirt hyperbolically with my opponent. I do that in every debate. I didn't even.
Now he's saying Joshua is unavailable. I just answered the call and it went away. So
okay,
what he's doing.
We'll give you 2 minutes, Apologist Supreme, just because he's calling back in now. So just answer that.
Okay, give me 1 second to put him back in.
Okay, yeah, they're accusing me of flirting with you now, Vaush. And I must say, with that voice, I am slightly.
Okay.
All right, sorry, I had to leave for a second. I'm back.
Josh, you're back.
I thought you kicked me out. That's why.
No, we muted you.
Josh, I missed you. I thought you left me.
No,
We're so worried about
I would not disrespect y'all by doing that. I thought I was kicked out or something. I thought it was at the end, and I was just y'all kicked me out. But no.
I'm going to give you. We didn't kick you out. There must have been a connection issue or whatever. But no, we wouldn't kick you out.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you the same opportunity that I gave Vaush. And here's your chance to plug your channel. Anything that you have coming up, that sort of thing.
Well, I'm on Red Pill Religion. You can find me there. You can subscribe to Red Pill Religion. We do debates and discussions and anything. After hearing tonight, I don't think I've heard anything sophisticated as it comes to the whole argument, but thank you for having me on. I think theism is still undefeated.
You mean you didn't hear anything sophisticated from your end, which we totally agree with. So
no, I didn't hear anything sophisticated from your end.
Oh, Josh.
Josh, are you going to be joining us for the after show?
Yeah. I'm not. I have to get to bed.
I don't blame you.
No, I think you should. There's a couple things that I kind of want to point out to you. I think you should.
You can point them out here.
I wanted to kind of. You started talking about the
I see.
and causational stuff, it'd be too much to get into right here. But you have to
join us.
Realize that it's just not a really great argument. So I was going to get into detail about that.
We're gonna close out here. Once again, thank you to Apologist.
Yeah, invite me.
I think, and definitely thank you to Vaush for joining us. We look forward to having, actually, in a sick way, I look forward to having you both on at some point. But we tomorrow at 7 o'clock will be joined by Team Skeptic and Fight the Fight Earth. We're doing a channel takeover for Science or Satire. Make sure you join us for that. That's at 7 p.m. Eastern, and then immediately following, we will be doing the first episode of Shannon and I's call-in show. You can call in at 1313 NonSec1. That's 1313 NonSec1, and we will be taking your calls for the hour and a half that follows. So join Steve and I tomorrow at 7 p.m. and then Shannon and I tomorrow at 9 p.m. And we'll see you in the after show, which will be on Steve's channel. He will link it in the live chat, so you'll know where to go.
Okay. Can you send me
don't forget super chat.
The link?
We'll send you.
You want to do the super chats in the after show?
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I need to do those
do
now.
Do them here. There's not that many. Get them out of the way.
My bad, guys. I almost forgot about you.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, super chats. Thank you for reminding me of that. falling off here.
In the after show,
okay.
I'm going to talk about video games.
Sweet. Mike MC, did you watch Jesse Lee Peterson on Hugo and Jake? Thoughts? I haven't seen it yet, but I plan to.
I love him.
We had him on. We had him on about 2 months ago, and it was amazing. Amazing.
It was amazing.
Wait,
if you haven't seen,
if
you haven't seen it,
Jesse Lee Peterson on?
Oh yeah.
Holy shit, he's a hero of mine. Oh my god. No, nothing. I'm sorry. No, James is really cool.
If you want to see something special, go to Jesse Lee Peterson's channel and watch his discussion with Steven Anderson, the far right fucking nut job, new independent Baptist, fundamentalist Baptist, whatever. The guy that thinks that you can't rape your spouse. Watch what Jesse Lee Peterson does to Steven Anderson. It's amazing. And although I disagree with pretty much everything Jesse Lee Peterson says, this time I was in his corner cheering him on. So go check that out. Kuyasa, so now that shrooms are legal in Denver, will we be getting an annual NonSequitur convention there? It's possible. Jimmy and I from the Mr. Atheist channel are maybe. Godless Engineer, no, Red Pill is not growing fast, nor is it a healthy environment for anyone. Quit lying, super apologist.
I'll debate him or anybody.
It is true. It's not growing, but
it's really not.
My Unfinished Journey. Supreme
Absolutely,
Apologist.
It's growing.
No, it's not. I just checked your social blade. It's not. My Unfinished Journey.
Look at the subscriptions on there.
I did. Supreme Apologist sounds like William Lane Craig Jr.
Says otherwise.
Right. Common sense. When you find some, come talk to me. Supreme Apologist sounds like William Lane Craig Jr. Christopher M. Hansen, Steve, real in the quotes. Josh, quote more. Cajun Crustacean, Red Pill Religion guy should have been in the Kentucky Derby with how much he's gish galloping. The Infernal Atheist, just discovered your channel. Love the creative talent behind your graphics, especially the surprise between the hands of the smoking gun. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much. That would be me. I do the graphic stuff. And the surprise between the hands of the smoking gun, I'm not sure what you're referring to. If there is a surprise in there, it was not intentional. So I'll be looking at that unless you're just trolling me. Flamio says, Apologist Supreme is a... What is that emoji? I can't tell what that emoji is, but you're something. My Unfinished Journey. So it took the religion of love to turn gunpowder into a weapon. Yay, Jesus. Kuyasa, dang it. No wonder sounded so familiar. Glad to meet another Marxist, Vaush. S.J. Thomason says, does Vaush think Marxism is beneficial? Seriously? Do you want to answer that, Vaush?
Yeah, I think Marxism is real fucking good, and I'll talk about it with you anytime. On here, on my stream, in person, I will fly to your town, and I will bring with me all my literature, and we will read it together, and we will be friends by the end of it, and you will agree with me.
Look at the 20th century.
The Amazing Zed says, will Josh ever answer a single question? Find out the next episode of the NonSequitur show. That next episode will be a ways away. My Unfinished Journey. Josh is turning me into an antitheist. Mike Mick says blah blah script, blah blah quotes, blah blah beta. Dan, hell, you guys are amazing. Thanks for all you do. No, you're amazing, Dan. Thank you for your support. Mike Mick, wait, super chats cost real monies. Takes shots. The Random Explorer, guess who subscribed to Vaush? This guy is awesome. So there you go. That's good. My Unfinished Journey. Some stand on the shoulders of giants. Josh has never stood on the ground. Kuyasa. So I heard some of the boys here saying Steve you owes us a shirtless show. Yes, that's coming on my birthday in July. July the 18th. Yeah, the summer. He will be. He lost a bet between Josephus and Tacitus, so he will be.
Well, no.
Going shirtless.
Well, technically, I lost a bet that you made that I agreed to, which I probably shouldn't have. But
yeah. I love NonSec from RJ. Thank you. We love you too. Reed Charbonneau says the real said truth is people like Vaush have few to no kids, while people like Josh have multiple kids. That fact has to change to subvert theocracy. That's a very interesting point.
You're listening.
want to speak to that?
Probably
I
be
could be
dead
having
in
a lot of
in
kids
a
right
few
now if I was a little
generations
less
because of not having kids anyway.
Well, I think that's a very interesting point. The people that probably that would have sort of or bring up a generation of people that are, you know, more free thinkers and more critical thinkers aren't having the kids. Meanwhile, the ones who are, you know,
You're not
heavy
more
into
critical.
Huh?
I think that's a myth.
No, that's not a myth at all. That's demonstrable. You can watch this stream and see that that's demonstrable.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Anything else? Okay, that's fine. Tammy T says, quote by Richard Dawkins, offense is the last straw. The faith heads clutch while they run out of rational arguments. Thanks, guys, for opening my eyes. You're welcome. Sierra
None of them
says,
were addressed.
can we put a muzzle on Apologist Supreme? Vegan Atheist Coral says, oh, shit. Poll time. A, Vaush. B, Josh. Who argued better? You can answer that in the live chat now. A for Vaush or B for Josh. Translator Carminium says, I'll bet in 20 years, Apologist Supreme's descendants will argue that Christianity was responsible for LGBTQ rights, much in the same way it's now arguing it was responsible for women's rights. I think that's a good point. Mike Mick Vaush, I want to PP touch you once. Haha.
Well, what are you going to do? Left wing destroyed.
Just some guy. For my favorite two rising stars, NonSequitur and Vaush. Thank you. Jeff C. Debate is dead. Josh is still talking. Proof of afterlife. All right, there's 4 more here. Kuyasa, Marxist plus anarchist plus postmodernist is an interesting combo. But why Durkheim wouldn't Derrida fit better?
Durkheim.
Thanks.
Oh, I apologize. That was directed at me. For Durkheim? Oh, well, I wouldn't call myself like a Durkheimian or anything like that. Just that in that specific regard, I think his sociological approach to religious issues is pretty spot on.
Okay. And last 4 here. My Unfinished Journey, Josh's argument equals blusterfuck. Knockdown Wheel. Josh, if Christianity is so superior, how come so many factions can't even come to an agreement on basic human rights issues? For example, on LGBTQ or abortion. Yes.
Answer that. Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis says, even though there's so many denominations, we all agree on the essentials.
What does Josh say?
I agree with C.S. Lewis. That's why I quoted him.
Got it. Joseph Adams, Vaush, have you ever debated or considered debating Mark Levine? I think that would be epic.
Mark Levine?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mark Levine, the conservative radio talk show host?
Yeah, he was asking Vaush.
Is he still around?
I mean, I would be delighted to. My clout, still fairly limited, mind. I mean, I've only been on YouTube for 3 or 4 months, but I'm a pretty ambitious person. If I could start bringing in figures like that, yeah. There's no one in the internet. Actually, to clarify.
You should read some of these arguments from natural theology.
I think he's 60 right now.
Yeah, I know he's up there in age. I used to listen to him years ago.
He's still on.
I don't think there's a conservative. Oh, sorry?
He's still on.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think that there's a conservative, reasonably speaking, that could beat me in a debate. That sounds incredibly conceited, but as of this time, I have a very low opinion of
what about
particularly
me?
American conservatives.
I'm gonna call
conservative?
Sean Hannity, and we'll get that situated. You and Sean, how about that?
Did you say what about you?
Sean.
Did you say what about you, Apologist Supreme?
I'm sorry. What was the question?
Did you just say what about you?
Yeah.
Now you're just trolling me.
Well, I'm sorry. I don't think I did lose. I think I won.
Listen. I'm a lover, not a fighter.
Clearly,
okay? I would win through seduction.
Clearly.
All right, but yeah, I think that. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. I think we both
say that.
Vosh,
it's like a participation award. Just give it to him, okay? Just let him have it. Okay? Come on.
Oh my God.
23.
You
You're 43.
Delusional.
Well, you said I quote the Bible. Not once did I quote the Bible. That's a grand straw man.
No, you didn't quote the Bible, but you quoted everything else in existence, literally. That's the
because
one thing
I
you didn't quote.
Please don't
And guess
look
what?
down on
Guess
me
what?
because I read.
He did not say that you quoted the
philosophy
Bible.
books.
He did not. That was not something that he did. Stop
Yeah, I don't
saying that's
remember him
what he
saying it
did.
either, but
That's not what he did. He did not do
yeah,
that.
actually, Josh, you kind of accused him of saying a couple of different things that I never heard him say. And even if you you didn't quote the Bible, but you can't
give
have
me an
an
example.
Hang on,
No,
you
we
cannot
have to
have an
move on.
argument based strictly off citations. I'm all for citations. Look, man, you're talking to me. I believe in citations. I ask for people for citations all the time. I have never made an argument where strictly this is just one big citation. Here it is. No, I have my original arguments, right? I give an argument. I'll give the reasons, but you use the citations to buttress them, to support them, to give them credibility as far as the argument and the structure of the argument. Right? You don't do that. You just say, "Here's C.S. Lewis."
At the first
there you
of the
go.
debate, I quoted
Okay, guys, I've got to finish these up so that
we got to wrap
Vaush
this.
can get
Yeah,
to his
we gotta wrap
burrito and we can get to the after show. Let's see. Wolf says 243 to 0 sounds like the kind of record sounds like the kind of record a fifth grader makes up in PE class because he wants to be the cool kid. That sounds like a big number. Javis 123111 says, Steve, get me in this after show. I need that in my life. Jack Attack LP says, syndicalist bear destroys choir boy in front of old man and howdy doody greet stream. I'm assuming I'm the howdy doody.
Well,
that's fucked
I'm
up.
just a victim in the circumstances that have led us to this moment.
Yeah.
You are.
Don't blame him.
That's historical inevitability.
Steve's headphones toss was the best. Dave, just buy Apologist Supreme. I hate that you didn't make it to the very end, but I can't with you anymore. Mike Mick, Steve headphones toss was the best. And then Wolf says, if I meet Vaush in real life, I think I only recognize him if he turns to the right.
Protruding the jawline, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys for. One more. Mark Beiser says, has Apologist Supreme ever had an original thought? The answer to that is no, but he can quote you on the person who has, and the guy is a human quote book. But thank you nonetheless. I guess Apologist Supreme for coming on. Thank you to Vaush for joining us. This was a pleasure, and we will see you here in just a few for not here, over on Steve's channel for the after show. Good night, and see you next time.
Oh, I love life.
And one more thing for y'all, just because apparently Apologist Supreme doesn't understand statistics. That's what's been happening to Red Pill Religion over the last few months.
Yeah, okay. What the word growth
this is a good point. This does not in any way mean growth, Apologist Supreme.
Right.
I can't believe I'm having to demonstrate graphs to you or explain graphs to you how they work.
All right. See you guys in a few.